I'm keen to introduce myself. I'm Fiona Hartley. I'm one of the careers consultants, and I'll be hosting our guest panel speakers today in this environment and sustainability Q&A panel session. This is one of several sessions taking place throughout the week. So we invite you to look closely at the events pages on our website should any more of these similar Q&A panel sessions interest you. I'll say a little bit more about that at the end. But before we start and I introduce our panelists, who I have to say I'm very grateful for them coming today and sharing their support and their insight with hints and tips. But just a few housekeeping rules. You'll notice that we've put you all on mute. We are recording this session currently. The intention is that it will be placed onto our Career Service YouTube channel. So if you're aware of that and you prefer to have your camera off, then please now is the time to turn your camera off. Otherwise, we invite you to kind of keep your camera on. It's helpful for our speakers to see the audience out there. So the plan for today's session is we've got 5 speakers today. Each of them will take in turns to give you a quick 5-minute overview of their career paths, trajectories, and then we'll open it to questions for the last 20 minutes of the hour that we've got together now. If you've got questions, you're very welcome to put them into the chat box. I'll be monitoring that alongside my colleague Ange. But as we open up for questions towards the end of today's session, then we will invite you to unmute your mic if you prefer and ask your question out loud. So I believe that's everything for now. So I'm going to hand immediately over to our first panelist, Jackson Smith, environmental designer with Skanska. Jackson, if you're happy to share your slides, we give you the running order for now.
Perfect. Can you all see my screen, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Great. Yeah, so hi everyone. I'm Jackson Smith and I'm an environmental designer at Skanska. I'll quickly introduce Skanska first and sort of what we do. So we're a principal contractor and one of the UK's and one of the world's leading construction and project management companies. Founded in Sweden in 1887 with 34,000 employees worldwide. We founded in the UK in the year 2000 and we have over 5,300 employees. So we work on a range of different types of projects, leading from infrastructure on the likes of HS2, the A14 project in Cambridge, what I'm working on currently, and a number of different sort of UK essential infrastructure projects, as well as building projects leading from sort of public sector buildings all the way through to housing development and refurbishment of sort of buildings. Yeah. And then we also specialize in a lot of specialist construction services as well, such as concrete design, structural design, and sort of interior design as well, what leads to a lot of engineering solutions. And this is where I sort of sit in terms of environmental design and sort of specialist consultation within the construction design process. So I'll quickly introduce my education. So I started Newcastle University in 2015 on the environmental science program, covering basically sort of, yeah, environmental sciences topic, natural sciences. Specifically, if anyone's on the environmental science course, it focuses a lot on like soil, air pollution, pollution of land. And then I decided to take the integrated master's route and spent a 4th year studying clean technology, what really focuses on sort of environmental management and sustainable development in an industrial context, and really applying that knowledge that you've learned of sort of the physical environment and applying that to business practices. And I'm quite sure a lot of you, if you don't go into the lab and the research route, you will apply your sort of knowledge of the physical and natural environment into into business practice and, you know, environmental management. At Newcastle Uni, I was part of a different few activities. I was president of the Soil Society. It was a lot more fun than it actually sounds. Got some great skills and a lot out of that. And then I was also the chair of the staff student committee. I really do recommend that if you're in your final year, in your first year, whatever year you're in, to get involved as much as you can in different activities at university, because it really does sort of help expand that skill set, and you really do pick up a lot of skills that, you know, are really useful in the workplace. Communication, organisation, sort of team leading, all of the generics that sometimes you're really required to show in your initial graduate interviews, while the university course really sets you up for, you know, your initial sort of career. Being able to sort of show how you've applied these extra skills really helps. So my career history, it's quite varied. It hasn't always been construction and infrastructure. Initially, in between my second and third year of uni, I spent 4 months as a research assistant in urban carbon capture at Newcastle University, looking at sort of the engineering design of urban brownfield soils and how we can use them to optimize carbon capture within cities. That was extremely fun. I got to work with a lot of external stakeholders as well, also sort of the relevant research departments at Newcastle Uni. For a year, alongside my masters, I acted as the sustainability lead at Barbour, what are sort of the UK fashion clothing brand famous for the wax jackets and are based in South Shields. Again, I'd never really had any experience in sort of clothing and manufacturing, so this was the first time I really applied sort of my knowledge of the sort of physical and natural environment and sort of what I was learning at my master's in an actual business context. It was incredibly fun. I got to sort of implement and work on the actual environmental management systems within the company, but then also working on the likes of sort of sustainability, sustainable procurement, sustainable sort of material sourcing and packaging as well. So that was really fun. Once I graduated, I started as an environmental consultant at Environmental Monitoring Solutions, working in construction on a number of sort of public sector principal contractor buildings, including the new Newcastle University teaching buildings. What really sort of started my career in construction. I then started Skanska in August 2020 as an environmental designer, and essentially my role is all upcoming in major and minor infrastructure projects in Peterborough and Cambridge Combined Authority are reviewed by myself. I essentially make sure that the screen for EIA and then go through the relevant environmental impact process with each major project, but then also review them from a sustainability context as well, making sure that, you know, these designs are environmentally compliant, but also that environmental impact is mitigated throughout the design process all the way through to construction. But also making sure that each construction and infrastructure project is, you know, net zero carbon, and that we're enhancing and ensuring that we've got a biodiversity net gain on each one of the projects. A few projects that I've worked on, or I'm currently working on the design of, really range. So Fletton Keys in Peterborough, St Ives Bridge. What's actually not an upcoming design, it's a 15th century bridge, on one of the only bridges in the UK with a chapel on it, but it needs to be repaired, and you'd think that sort of an upcoming massive infrastructure project would have a lot of environmental impact, but this one has just as much and requires just as much work, even though it's, you know, an existing bridge. So that's taken up a lot of my time, but it's extremely exciting. And also Fenton Road roundabout in Cambridge, what's actually the first Dutch style roundabout in the UK, what basically aims to improve sort of, you know, and optimize cycling infrastructure in the city of Cambridge. So some really exciting projects that really do use sort of my fundamental knowledge of the physical environment that I learned in undergrad, and then sort of my postgraduate masters in sort of environmental management. And then, utilizing all of the skills that I've also used as well. So, you know, communication is probably the most important one from the aspect of, you know, I'm the one with the environmental knowledge and I have to communicate that to the designers, the transport planners, the principal, you know, urban planners, and ensuring that they understand sort of the considerations that we need to take into account of. So some top tips, as a graduate, I would really recommend that you join a professional body, especially IEMA. They offer direct sort of graduate membership. What's the Institute of Environmental Managers, CIREM as well, and CIREM. They're all really good bodies, and they do offer sort of a lot of CPD opportunities, but also a lot of support for graduates that are wanting to join the sector. I'd say work experience is key. If you might not be lucky enough, or you might struggle to maybe get a year's internship at one of the big consultancies or whatever else, but even a week's worth of unpaid work experience is really valued when we're interviewing people. So I wouldn't worry too much about how much work experience you have, as long as you've showed that you've got some. Networking, really important. You're never too young to start networking as a graduate member. As a student member of these societies, I really do recommend that you go along to the events that they host. Again, you can meet some really useful people that can help you with your degree, but at the same time, there's always opportunities to meet people there that could offer sort of career opportunities. And LinkedIn as well. If you haven't already got a LinkedIn account, I really do recommend that you get one. Again, really good opportunity for networking, and a lot of companies directly advertise their jobs on LinkedIn now, as opposed to sort of job sharing boards. So yeah, LinkedIn's definitely a useful one to have. And if you do want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm more than happy to. Yeah, if anyone has any questions directly about working in UK infrastructure or environmental design or environmental impact assessment, I'm more than happy to answer your questions. Thank you. Hopefully I met the 5-minute criteria.
Jackson, that was spot on. That was spot on. Very, very much appreciate that. So we'll if you're able to stop sharing your slides.
I think I'm off now. Yeah, I've stopped sharing.
Right, you're off now. Yeah, okay. So next in our running order, our panel is a duo of Karen and Laura, who both work as technical advisors for Northumbria Water. Karen, do you want to speak first, and then we'll allow Laura to share her slides, if that's okay with you?
Yeah,
guys?
that's fine. Can you see me slides?
Thank you very much.
Yes. I'm afraid I haven't used the corporate Northumbrian Water PowerPoint presentation, but this is sort of about how I got to where I am. I've graduated from Newcastle University in 1990, but before that I really liked science, chemistry in particular. But when I was choosing my O-level and A-level options, I decided to do dentistry. And I actually got to Newcastle University to do dentistry. And unfortunately, I didn't make it through the first year, and decided, because I liked chemistry and it was quite a general degree, to switch to chemistry. So that's what I did. I did get some work experience. I had a summer job at Tioxide on Seal Sands, working in the technical services lab, and I also took part in the Erasmus exchange scheme, where I worked in the organic chemistry lab at Hamburg University, and that was a fantastic experience. And I do hope that Erasmus exchanges continue into the future. When I graduated, I was actually offered 3 jobs, one with a French chemical company, one with the National Rivers Authority, which had just been set up, and one with a sort of glue company in Jesmond that I think is now halls of residence for Northumbria University. And I decided I was going to save the planet with my chemistry degree. So that's what I did, basically. It wasn't as well paid as the French chemical company, but I had a fantastic time, and I really believed in what I was doing. I was an assistant pollution prevention officer, which is probably the longest job title ever. But I got to go out on boats monitoring the water quality in the River Tees in particular, and did a bit of work on the Weir as well. And there was an awful lot of outfalls going directly into the environment at that stage, so a lot of sampling and excuse me, I'm gonna sampling and analysis. And back in 1990, we didn't have a lot of computers in the office, so we actually had to write results from the lab and file them away in a big filing cabinet. So very different to how we work now, but lots of practical experience. And I also like going and talking to kids and telling them about pollution and the future and protecting the environment. So that kind of led me on to my next stage. And I had a secondment to the head office in Leeds as education officer, and that led to someone saying, "Oh, I think you'd make a good teacher." So I ended up being a science teacher for a while. But while I was a science teacher, I started a family, and unfortunately the head couldn't let me go part-time. So I decided to be a stay-at-home mum for a bit. And during that time off, I had 5 years when I was working. I actually worked in the university library part-time, sort of jobs that wouldn't entail a lot of childcare costs, because I had 2 children under 3. And I decided that actually I wanted to go back to protecting the environment and not back to teaching. So my next thing, talking about networking, I'd kept in touch with colleagues from the National Rivers Authority, which became the Environment Agency, and they were actually looking for staff. So I ended up going back through the Environment Officers Recruitment Scheme. So I did a lot of waste regulation, went to landfills, waste recycling sites, a little bit of water pollution, but not that much, and also contaminated land. And I got quite interested in contaminated land things. So I found a job with Wansbeck Council, which was actually better paid than the Environment Agency, and I went to work for a local authority as an environment officer, but with responsibility for contaminated land. The Wansbeck Council became Northumberland County Council, so I ended up staying there for about 10 years as the contaminated land specialist. But I got to the top of my scale as a technical officer, and to progress I would have had to become an environmental health officer, which sort of did all sorts, food and everything. And I did hum and haw about what I wanted to do, but I decided that I didn't want to become an environmental health officer. I wanted to work with water again. So I applied for a couple of jobs with Northumbrian Water. I didn't get the first one I went for, and then I applied for a secondment, which was quite a big risk for me, taking a temporary job, but I did. And that's where I am now. I've been a technical advisor in the wastewater team since 2016. I've had a couple of temporary positions, but I'm now employed permanently, and I work with Laura. We're an all-female team. I won't say too much about it because she might want to bring some things in, but we do a lot of troubleshooting at wastewater treatment works. We work on national projects, so with the Environment Agency and other water companies, such as the Chemical Investigation Programme, and I'm currently working on integrated constructed wetlands as well, and how we would permit sort of more natural sites. So that's me, really. See if I can stop screen sharing.
Thank you so much, Karen, for that insight. Now timely to hand over to Laura and share experiences too. Thank you.
Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen. Yes, good stuff.
Yeah, great.
So basically, this is me. So I went to Newcastle University between 2003 and 2007. I think, like a lot of people, I was really unsure about what I wanted to do. I didn't really know what opportunities were out there. I had done an applied biology degree, and during my time there, I'd had many different part-time jobs growing up and when I was at uni. So I worked as a waitress, I worked in a bar, I worked at Diggerland in the shop, which was fun. But I was also a gymnastics coach for children between 3 and 13 years old, twice a week. And I thought that might be a route that I wanted to go down. I might want to go into the teaching route. So what I actually did was I went into a school for 4 weeks when I was in my sort of end of the second year uni. And after 4 weeks of being in a school, I decided this is really not what I want to do at all. I don't want to be a science teacher. So then that was sort of what do I want to do? At least I'd ruled teaching out, which is one of the routes that I thought I might go down. But luckily in my third year at uni, it was an optional year in industry. And Northumbrian Water had put an advert out, and I saw that advert and I thought, oh, water, okay. I never really considered it, didn't really know a lot about it, but I went for the job and I got the job, and I was there for a year. And basically I had a great time for a year. I learned a lot about water treatment, about sewage treatment. I did bits of sampling, analysis, and then looked at the results, interpreted all the data. I ran a full-scale trial on one of our sewage treatment works. So overall, it was a great experience, and I learned a lot about the water industry as a whole. So obviously in my fourth year, I had to go back to university and got my degree. But it was at this point that I had a bit of a light bulb moment, and I did think the water industry is really varied. There's lots of different jobs there. It's really interesting. I'm constantly learning, and I got to work with a lot of different types of people. Also, I realised I really didn't want to work in a lab. I did a lot of tiny little pipetting in centrifuge tubes at university, and I'm sure you guys will relate to it, and looking at these gels, and it really didn't float my boat. So I think that's, you guys are probably here because you want to learn about what other opportunities there are and what other jobs there are. Because if people think of scientists, what do you think of? A guy in a lab in a white coat with a pipette or a microscope. And science is a lot more than that. So after my fourth year, luckily, Northumbrian Water were advertising for a job, and I applied and miraculously got the job. But I think if I hadn't done my year in industry, I wouldn't have even really considered Northumbrian Water as a route. So I was a technical advisor too in the wastewater assets and water asset strategy department, and I did this for 3 years. I worked on a variety of different projects. There was a lot of data interpretation, but I also did some optimization of treatment plants, as well as writing technical strategies for the company to do with treatment. After the 3 years, I got a secondment into the operational team, wastewater operational team at Howden Sewage Treatment Works as a process technician. So Howden's the largest sewage treatment works that we've got. It serves about 1 million people. All your wastewater goes to Howden if you live in Newcastle. And during this time, I was involved in the day-to-day running of the plant. It was my responsibility to make sure that the effluent that left the works was actually compliant and clean enough to be discharged. And I made the day-to-day changes to the process. I looked after a budget while I was there. I tried to optimise the plant in terms of energy usage and in terms of chemical usage. And I worked with a big group of guys on site. It was very male dominated. I was the only woman, but I like a challenge, so that was fine. After this secondment was up, after the 2 years, I went back to my previous role, which had sort of moved slightly. So water and wastewater had been split up, and the wastewater team had joined the wastewater compliance team. The role had changed very slightly. I got involved in a lot more day-to-day issues. So the operators would ring up and say, I've got a problem with my treatment works. I'm not really sure what the problem is. Can you come and have a look? So my role would be to go to site, do some samples, do some analysis, try and find out what the problem was and how to make the process better. I also worked on lots of sort of more planned projects there as well. So after about 6 years of doing that, I got promoted up to a technical advisor 1, which is just a grade higher, a bit more responsibility. You work with a lot more consultants, and it's a bit more involved in the design of treatment plants, so what we should actually physically put in the ground. And then I also took on responsibility of being the team leader for the team. So as Karen said, there's only 3 of us in our team, so it's quite easy to manage Karen and the other lady that works with us. And I've done that for 2 years. So really briefly, projects I work on, first of all, is making sure what comes out of the back end of our treatment plant of sewage treatment works is compliant and clean enough, and we field queries from guys on site. I'm heavily involved in an upgrade of Howden, which is a £100 million project. The population of Newcastle and the surrounding areas we think it's going to increase, so we need to make sure that the treatment plant can accept all of the wastewater. So I'm heavily involved in the design of that, do capacity evaluations of treatment works as well, chronic investigations. If there's a long-term ongoing issue on a plant, we get involved, and I also do odour surveys, take measurements around treatment plants. Yes, they smell, and yes, you do get used to the smell. So that is me in a nutshell. So
Thank you very much. Hugely appreciate that. A very varied and quite challenging role, I'm sure. We're shortly going to move on to Matt, who's very much closer to home as he works as Head of Sustainability here at Newcastle University. I'm aware that there are one or two questions that are starting to go into the chat box. And we'll visit those questions as we open up to general Q&A. But let us firstly hear from Matt and then finally from Lottie. Matt, are you okay to unmute yourself?
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So I haven't got any slides today. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about my career path outside the lab, which didn't begin outside the lab. It actually started in a water treatment works in Norwich. I did my undergraduate degree in environmental science at University of East Anglia, UEA in Norwich. And when I graduated, my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, still had a year to go on her degree, so I was casting around for a job, and lo and behold, I managed to get into the water treatment works in Norwich. So I did. I was trying to remember. It was probably a couple of years actually in the lab, I think, before we moved up to Newcastle. So I did things like biological oxygen demand titrations, chemical oxygen demand titrations. I did solid waste, and I also did a bit of biological analyses looking for cryptosporidium and that sort of thing in the lab. So that provided me with a good grounding in practical lab-based stuff to build on the stuff that I'd done in my undergraduate degree. In my environmental science degree, I took quite a broad range sort of the modules available. Really regretted not taking the ecology module in the first year, because that closed down a lot of my options that I would have been interested in. So it actually set me on a career path perhaps slightly different to perhaps what I would have chosen if I'd had my time over again. But I don't regret it. These are the choices you make, and you end up going down a road. So anyway, after I'd done a couple of years in the lab for Anglian Water, we moved up to Newcastle, and I was on the dole. So this was would have been about 1995, just as Tony Blair's government was coming in, the New Deal, and they did the New Deal for the unemployed. So the Labour government at that time created a programme called the New Deal for the Unemployed, where basically you got an extra tenner a week on your dole if you did an internship with a company. So I went to the job centre in Biochar, having just arrived in Newcastle, where my wife started a second degree at Northumbria, and said, so I've heard about this New Deal thing on the news then, what have you got that's environmentally related? And after the lady had fallen off her chair at someone sort of proactively asking what they had on the programme in Biochar Job Centre, she said, well, we've actually got loads. We've got loads of programmes. Which one do you want? So there was options for working in the waste industry, the energy industry, water industry. You know, the major employers in the region had all provided placements through this program, and it was actually a fantastic opportunity, because it meant that I didn't spend too long on the dole at the end of the day, and then I got a foot in the door. And the placement that I chose was with Newcastle City Council as a sort of energy technician. So I worked in their energy team, looking at things like doing energy surveys of schools, looking after the building management systems that control the heating, writing reports and seeking funding to carry out the energy measures and reduce carbon emissions in local authority stock. So it gave me a really good grounding, and I did that for 6 months or on the New Deal for the unemployed. So it was essentially an internship, you know, an extra tenner a week. It wasn't very well rewarded, but it was a fantastic foot in the door. And then I stayed on at the council in a range of roles, really. Initially in admin, just an admin job. They didn't have an environmentally focused role. Then a job became available in the waste team. So I spent some time with working on trade waste in particular, and also on the rollout of wheelie bins in Newcastle. I've literally walked every street in Newcastle because I was involved in the rollout of wheelie bins in Newcastle, and specifically on the sort of GIS aspects of that, planning the routes and using the GIS skills that I'd got at university to actually plan how we were going to roll out that scheme. But it also involved walking the streets with a handheld every day for about 18 months, I think, to get it around the city. So that was sort of an interesting part. And then from there I moved back into the energy team and actually got a proper energy officer role and spent a number of years at Newcastle City Council. In the meantime, I was also studying for an MSc in climate change and sustainable development. But then I had children and I was doing that distance learning, and I got partway through that MSc and couldn't balance my work-life balance with a full-time job, my first child and an MSc. So I paused that MSc. Then I had a second child, which completely blew the finishing off the MSc out of the water. And just as I came back from paternity leave for the birth of my second child, my daughter, this would have been in 2005. I noticed that there had been a job advert at Newcastle University for an assistant energy manager. And that was to join the energy manager that already existed at the university, and essentially to create the first sort of sustainability team at Newcastle University by going from one bloke controlling energy to two of us controlling energy at the university. And I was successful in getting that position in the university. He promptly retired very shortly after I joined, and once the university obviously liked the look of me. And from there, I've built the sustainability team at Newcastle University, and we've grown to be a team of 8 over the intervening years, and we look after all things energy. So I apply the learning that I had in that sort of career path in all aspects of our role. So we look after energy, water, waste, recycling, circular economy, and particularly at the moment, net zero and how we're going to achieve net zero on behalf of the university. So we do all that under an environmental management system, which we often have clean technology students helping us work on. So I've got, I can see links with everyone else's career path and mine in this, but I think my 5 minutes is up, so I'll stop there. And if you've got any questions on that slightly strange career path, then do let me know.
Matt, thank you so much. I do have one question, but we'll leave that until we've heard now from Lottie, who again brings a diverse perspective on careers outside the lab. So thank you very much, Lottie, for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you, Fiona. So I started my career in science by doing molecular biology at Newcastle. It was a bachelor's degree, and in my first and second year I wasn't that focused on career. I was kind of more having a good time and wanted to go traveling, probably like most students. And then in third year it was the realization that I've actually got to work now. So I put my head down and looked around at other opportunities within the uni other than my course, and I saw something called an Actus, which is a society at the uni that helps encourage students to set up social enterprises. So those are businesses which basically have a social impact. So they're not driven by making profit, they're driven by making a difference. And I did an Actus in my final year, and that really molded my decision making when I left university. I decided that all the grad schemes I looked at looked a bit boring for me. They didn't look like they were going to really make an impact in the world. So I decided not to go and get a job. And my parents were obviously distraught at this point. So instead I applied to do an internship. It was a scholarship opportunity at Google to study digital marketing and leadership. And I was really interested in the leadership side. So I won that opportunity and did that for 9 months. And it was amazing because I was working with people from all different walks of life and different levels from different industries. So on my team was like the head of PR for Pepsi and also the head of marketing for Compare the Market. And then there was me, who had no idea what I was doing. And it's the scholarships aimed at putting people like recent grads in the deep end and helping them learn from people who are much further down the line. So I'd really recommend looking that up. And after I did that, I decided to set up my own digital marketing company. It did 2 years, but had a bit of like an existential crisis where I realized that I still wasn't making an impact or really bringing anything to the world. So then I decided about,
and then I've just received another one just now.
There was an opportunity for biochar, a technology which, when it's a special type of charcoal, which when you make it, it captures carbon from the atmosphere, and then when you put it in the soil, it stores it for hundreds of thousands of years, and it also brings benefits to the soil, so it can increase soil fertility. So I heard about biochar 2.5 years ago, and I thought, this stuff's really cool, it can actually make a difference, but nobody was doing it in the UK. So my co-founder and I decided to start the company Earthly Biochar to develop ways to make biochar and ways to use it in the UK and really be the leaders. And over the last 2.5 years, we've been really self-taught. So I haven't done any further qualifications. And we basically, it was kind of all, let's see what happens and follow our noses. We were following our passion. So we decided to reach out to councils to ask them if they wanted to test biochar. And our local council signed up to a trial of 4,000 plants, which was mind blowing when you've got like a team of 2 working part-time trying to make this work. And it was really beneficial. So like fast forward to today, we've just won some funding from Innovate UK, which is like the government's innovation funding service to keep running the business. And we're now developing sales opportunities with universities and councils and governments to implement biochar as part of their net zero strategy. But kind of looping back to working in a lab and stuff, I decided in September, well, just before September actually, I should probably do some more training, specifically in biochar and environmental science. So I looked around for some PhDs or masters, and I noticed there was literally nothing out there on biochar. Like the biochar boom had happened 10 years ago. Everyone had forgotten about it almost. That's at least what it seemed like. And so there was nothing active going on. And I reached out to a professor at Reading University who was really active in the biochar space. And he said, you should apply for this award. It will fund a PhD of your choice. So I did that and I won it, and I started a part-time PhD in biochar in September, and I now do that alongside running the company. So my role is split half between making sure we're really grounded in the science, like we're really accurate, and when we say our products are carbon negative, they really are. So we're really focused on accounting for all our carbon emissions and making sure biochar is used in the right way, because like many things, you can use it badly. So we want to be we're very morally driven. And then also I seek out funding opportunities with the government and focus on sales of biochar. So that's kind of my career path. It's very convoluted. I definitely didn't start out with a plan. I got into Newcastle University on clearing, so definitely not kind of the perfect student model, but I would advise everyone to follow their passions, apply for almost every opportunity ever, even if it feels really out of reach. I think networking is great advice as well, and just don't be afraid to pivot and start again. Like you heard, I did so many pivots along the way, and I had never heard of biochar when I got into it. So I think it's really important that if you're passionate about something and you know it can create a massive impact, it doesn't really matter, I don't think, what you have behind you. It's about what you put forward. So yeah, that's kind of, I think that might be 5 minutes, but yeah, that's me.
Lottie, that's a hugely inspirational story. I can see just how proactive and resilient you were throughout that journey as well, and being open to kind of taking risks and pushing yourself a little bit outside of your comfort zone. So those personal characteristics sound like they've been very important in your success too. So congratulations with that. Can I quickly ask, did you get any direct support from, because there will be many in our audience, I anticipate, would be interested in kind of self-employment or in working as an independent professional. Was there additional support that you accessed through the Careers Service for business startup? Or?
Yeah, there was. When I started the digital marketing company, I was just doing it on a whim. I didn't access any support then, although I wish I had. But when I started the Biochar business, that's when I looped back to the startup service at the uni, and they were so helpful. I won some funding from them. I won £1,000 grant that I had to pitch for, and that was hugely important because it meant that we could pay for R&D. And I also got some mentoring over the last couple of years and the connections that come out of that as well. So I definitely recommend using the startup service, and they make you realize that although kind of working for yourself and starting a business is this thing that no one really talks about when you're considering careers, or at least it wasn't when I was at uni like 4 years ago, they make you realize that it's totally feasible, and there is a guiding light. So I'd definitely reach out to them.
Great, thank you. And I'll share some links at the end of our session when we wrap up today. We're kind of open mic now if everybody's able to do that, and those that are keen to ask questions. But I first want to go to the question that went into the chat box from Ika. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. The question is, for environmental jobs in the UK, are certificates such as EMAS, NEBOSH, BREEAM, etc. absolutely necessary, or is membership of a professional environmental organisation such as CWIN and IEMA, are they sufficient in their own right? So questions there about qualifications and certification.
I would certainly echo Jackson's advice on this one, that it's certainly worth getting graduate membership of an organisation like IEMA or CWIN or whichever industry body is your chosen sort of route, and you might not have chosen a route, so something like and I certainly hadn't. That's the thing. So it's about taking those opportunities when they come. So graduate membership, and then if you can, once you're in your workplace and you've secured a position, see if you can get support from your employer to get the necessary support to and experience to become a full member of an organisation like IEMA. But the other ones listed there, like NEBOSH, EMAS, BREEAM experience, those are all sorts of things that would come with experience in a job. You don't need those up front, would be my view.
Yeah, I mirror that. So yeah, I mirror that. Yeah, I'd say if you do see a job advertised that does require the likes of BREEAM, maybe research what it is. You don't necessarily need to have that qualification, but if you Google BREEAM, for an example, it's the sustainability assessment of buildings and infrastructure projects. So, you know, it gives you a bit more of an understanding of what the job is that you're applying for and what you might be required to do in a day-to-day job. And that does give you a bit more, if you research it, you know what you're going to be talking about in an interview. So you don't necessarily need that qualification because they are very expensive courses to go on. However, you know, have an understanding of, you know, what it is, because then at least if you're asked on it, you can talk about it instead of, you know, being silent in an interview. And yeah, as I've said before, professional membership of a body really helps.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Please do put your hands up, the hand up function, if you want to ask any question and you're unhappy to unmute your mic. But there is a question in the chat box here, and I think this is an interesting one about the necessity to have a master's degree in an environmental field if you're coming from a slightly more diverse science background. So the importance of master's qualifications.
I can answer this one. So I would say that I didn't have a master's degree, and it might be slightly different depending on if you're going for a job in a big organization. They might require you to have that, so perhaps someone else might answer on that. But in terms of to get a PhD or to work in maybe a smaller team of a startup, I don't think that a master's is necessary. So it definitely didn't hinder me not having one, and applying for a PhD, it wasn't a requirement to do that. So if you, I guess there's the flip side is if you feel like you can get a job that will probably give you equally or if not more experience than a master's, then I think that could probably be a good substitution.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to basically say I totally agree with Lottie there. I don't have a master's, and there's many people in the organisation that don't, but it's all to do with experience. So if you can get any kind of experience, that will really set you ahead of other people, because you need to get experience outside of academia as well if you want to go down a different route. So I will just sort of say if you've got a part-time job in say a bar, and you're going against someone who's had a part-time job as an admin person, and if they've got the same qualifications, I'd always sort of tend to go towards people that have worked in a professional environment. So even if you weren't in a bar, maybe consider going and do temping at some time in an office or something like that to work in the different environments that you might have to go into. But yeah, going back to the question, I think a master's, it's not necessarily required throughout the different businesses. We certainly wouldn't ask for it. So yeah.
Okay, and I noticed. Thank you very much. And Matt, you have an additional comment to add?
Yeah, as I said in my little piece, I did start a master's. I certainly didn't need a master's to begin my career, but I had a personal aspiration to get one. But as I say, then my children got in the way, and I had a choice really about. I was quite driven in my career. My career has been a series of promotions essentially. Driving hard to achieve a promotion within, first of all, the city council, where I got several promotions before I then applied for the position within Newcastle University, and then driven a career path that didn't even exist within the university, and created a sort of team and role. So there is a definite work-life balance issue here, and I took the view in the end that my personal life, it was impacting, you know, the amount of time I was spending working and then studying for a long distance MSc. Something had to give, and so I struck that balance by giving up that ambition really and focusing on doing the best job that I could do within the workplace. So I reevaluated whether or not I thought an MSc was essential, to be honest, and I never completed that degree, and I can't get those credits, you know, those partially completed credits back now because it's been so long since I did it, and I would still like one in the end, but I haven't needed it to get to the role that I'm in today.
So
Fiona, sorry, I think I muted you rather than muting myself there. I apologise.
No worries. Yeah, it's about being proactive and building up experience, etc., to stand out with impact at interview. And we've got a question that's come in about, you know, how can you ensure that you stand out well at interview? Jackson, I want to put that question to you because I noticed you took up your position in August 2020 in the pandemic. So what was your experience like of the recruitment process, and what advice would you give to enable people to really stand out if perhaps they're short on direct experience?
Yeah, well, yeah, starting in a pandemic. So I interviewed online over Teams twice. I would recommend that treat it like, just because you're in your bedroom or whatever else, still treat it like a normal job interview, you know, put on a suit or your shirt or whatever. Turn up on time, make sure the link works, all of that stuff. You know, we've been interviewing people recently, and you know, they realize, you know, bang on the dot that the link doesn't work for the Zoom interview, and it's just, you know, it's things like that. You would never turn up to an interview unprepared, so make sure you do the same, even if it's online. I actually haven't been in the office yet since starting. I go on a lot of construction sites and stand in a lot of fields, but it's been weird starting a job, not going to the head office. But yeah, we're all adapting, as is, you know, learning, doing a degree online as well over Teams. But I'd say if you're struggling to get experience again, you know, even if you can just do a week's volunteering, you know, with your local nature group, cleaning the local river, it just shows your passion. It's all about showing your passion. And again, leading back to that master's question, there's a lot of environmental jobs out there, especially data, sustainability data analysis jobs. It's more about having the skill set to show that you've got the skill set to, you know, be able to handle data and interpret data and everything else. You don't necessarily need to have that, you know, 4 years experience, 4 years university experience of the environment, but instead just to show that you've got the data set and you've got the passion. And at the end of the day, in an interview, the interviewer will see your passion, and that's what we want to see. We want to see someone that's got a passion for the company, but then also the subject fields, and that's what will always win at the end of the day. And that's all we really want to see, that, you know, this person wants the job and that they really want to learn, even if they haven't got the experience, the willingness to learn. I can see that there's a question for me with regard to environmental. I'm sorry if I'm talking too much. With regard to environmental impact assessment. I work directly with local planning and national planning authorities, especially for major projects and national infrastructure. It might be best if I answer that, I don't know, over email, because it's quite lengthy, but essentially major projects are screened for EIA at planning stage. If the permitted developments, they still might have to go through EIA, and then you follow sort of different checklists to do that, and then you then start the EIA screening process. But I can answer that question offline. It might be easier.
Thank you, Jackson. We've probably got time for one more question. I'll double check in the chat box that there isn't a final question that's come in. Doesn't look like there is. I guess my question at this point to Karen and Laura is, how do you feel the pandemic will change the future ways of working at Northumbria Water, for example? Laura.
Go on, Karen, you go.
Well, for the last year, we have been working from home, but we also get to go out on site, which is great, but we do need to put sort of mitigation measures in place, social distancing, wearing face coverings, and that can be quite hard when you're trying to look at valves or, you know, something, a control panel on a sewage works. But it's definitely been a big change in the way we work, and technology, you know, that the remote stuff that we use now, it's been we haven't experienced sort of problems and national meetings. The national meetings I've attended, I've had to go down to London for a whole day, you know, travel a really long day, you know, 6 o'clock train in the morning and get back at 9:30 at night. And we're having more regular national meetings now because it's so easy, just using Teams or Zoom or whatever we can. So that's, you know, national things we're communicating more, I think.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Laura, is it?
I think it's very similar to what Karen said. We're getting better at using technology. One thing we have seen in this pandemic is people tend to be using more water. So we get more water arriving at the sewage treatment works, which causes us a little bit more problems. But behaviours are changing. I think everyone's adapting, and I think you know, we will end up travelling less. I think we might end up sort of being half in the office, half at home. And I think it has reduced the carbon footprint of the company. Everyone in the company is working from home, even the call centre staff are working from home, which is great for the environment because you're not travelling. But as I say, behaviour is changing and water usage is gone up. So.
Yeah. And Matt, I guess, you know, at the university, what do you perceive to be some of the future challenges and changes in your role, given the university's current positions?
Well, they're huge and unknown really at the moment, I suppose. So the impact on the team hasn't been huge in terms of being able to deliver what we need to do in terms of environmental management for the university. But the future of the university estate and how the business models of universities change to adapt to, you know, a post-COVID world, and the impact on international student recruitment, you know, home student recruitment, teaching models. Do we need as much space as we've got now? So obviously, with responsibility for net zero for the university, I'm keen that we rationalize space if we can, and certainly utilize it as best as possible. And at the moment, we've been running with largely empty buildings for the last year, you know, which from an efficiency point of view is really not ideal. So I think in terms of, there's a lot of work to be done on making buildings smarter to adapt to future pandemics in the future. So there's a huge amount to be done, really.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing.
Oh, I've done it again for you. I don't know what's the matter with me today on Zoom. So I swear I have been working from home for a whole year, and this is the first time I've ever muted somebody else in a meeting. So I do apologise. I don't know what's the matter with you today.
Thank you all for sharing your experiences. I think that final point there is, yeah, you know, always thinking about change and the future impact that climate change, etc., will have in regard to environment and sustainability. So on behalf of everybody that's been here today, a huge thank you to our speakers. Before we leave, we do have a poll that we would like people just to kind of take part in as a reflection on how you found today. But a quick reminder, I mentioned before that there are other events taking place for science outside the lab, so please do return to the events pages on our careers service website. We also have a lot of hugely useful, informative information that our information advisors have pulled together that is on the occupational pages of our website, titled Careers, Science Careers Outside the Lab. If this has given rise to additional questions, you know, you're very welcome to make an appointment through your My Career account for additional one-to-one support with a careers consultant or an information advisor like myself. But our speakers, I believe, all stole the virtue of LinkedIn and actively use LinkedIn. So, you know, again, I'm sure they'd be very happy to open up an additional dialogue with you via LinkedIn. I'm going to start the poll with feedback. If we want to capture your thoughts about how we found today's session before you leave. It helps us to plan and prepare sessions like this in the future years. But as you do that, can I give a virtual thank you of applause to our speakers, and many thanks for the time that you've given up. I know you're all extremely busy, but it's been hugely insightful.